Okay, I think we'll get started. Can people hear me okay? No. Well, this is for Luisa's height, not mine, so we'll adjust accordingly. Is this better? Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for coming out to our second Community Bridge Forum. Before we get underway, I want to thank Sandwich High School in the town of Sandwich for opening this space for us. Really appreciate that and helping set up this forum for everyone in the community. Want to make sure we recognize our elected officials who are here this evening, also working on this project. We have our district attorney, Rob Galabois, is here. Thank you, Rob. I saw select board members from Bourne. Peter Meyer is here, and Jean Azarevitz is here as well. And then I also saw Bill Cohan from Plymouth, select board member, popped in. And Congressman Keating's office is here as well. And the congressman's been intimately involved with helping secure funding for this project, which has been really important. So thank you all for coming out. MassDOT's, has posters out front that explain some of the project, and then there's going to give a presentation here about where the project's at, next steps, and then we're going to open this up for people to ask questions and to have a nice Q&A for the community to have their questions directly to MassDOT and have those questions answered. I do want to say this is, the most important project that this region has had since the creation of the canal over 100 years ago. This is the most impactful project. These bridges, the new bridges, will define transportation in our region for the next 100 years. And so it's really important that we have a lot of community involvement in this process, and it's really important that these bridges are done well and done right. And I know the team at MassDOT's really committed to that. There's a 2020 Army Corps report that I think some of us have seen in this room that says that if these bridges aren't completed, if they don't get new bridges, that the existing bridges, which are owned and operated by the federal government, by the Army Corps of Engineers, that they would have to do a full rehabilitation of the bridges. The Sagamore going first, and then the Bourne being next to have a full rehabilitation. And what a full rehabilitation is a completely shutting down of the bridge for 9 months, and then the bridge going to one-lane traffic for 2 years after that. So that can never happen. The dollar figure that would impact our region if that were to happen is in the billions of dollars. And then anyone who's a local here like myself, and you all know, it would just bring chaos to our entire region. And so it's so important that these projects move forward and that we avoid that catastrophic impact and potential catastrophic impact to our region. The new bridges, as you will see and may have seen, are modern. They are not two-lane bridges that are really one lane and you're kind of gripping the steering wheel with anxiety as you're going over the bridges. They are 2 full lanes, a breakdown lane in each direction, and then also there's pedestrian access. People can actually walk across the new bridges. People can actually bike across the new bridges. So it'll just be a modern and important update. So important for me as the state senator in our region, where this bridge project is in the heart of it, that this is a transparent process, that this is an open process, and that you, the community and the constituents that I represent, and really everyone on the Cape and Islands and South Shore and beyond, have a voice in this project and also understand where the project is and where it's headed, And Louisa Pewanski, who's the head of this project for the state, agrees and has been out there having these open forums and is committed to continuing these dialogues with the community. And so I really appreciate Louisa for her effort to make sure people understand what's happening and make sure this is a community process. So with that, I'll turn it over to the head of the project for the state, Louisa Pewanski. Thank you all.
Now we're going to lower the microphone. Can people hear me? Barely? Okay. How about this? Better? Okay. Thank you, Senator. We really appreciate your leadership on this, especially in constant communication with us and setting up these forums, giving us an opportunity every quarter to provide you with an update on these incredibly important bridges. We also appreciate Sandwich High School for hosting us, and the elected officials who have worked closely with us, elected and municipal officials. We've been just in Bourne last week. We would be happy to come meet with any select board members or officials or community groups to talk about this bridge project. Senator Fernandes said quite rightly that the bridges have enormous influence and importance for people in Cape Cod. One of the frequent items you pick up on in the studies of the Cape Cod bridges over the years is how much they contribute to the state economy, a way outsized, disproportionate impact to the entire Massachusetts economy. But we know that the bridges are most important to the 230,000 year-round Cape Cod residents, and we take that to heart. We work on these bridges every day, knowing how much Cape Codders rely on them for connections to the mainland and back, and many other purposes as well. So we take that responsibility quite seriously, and we appreciate your comments, candid comments, to help us do our job better every day. So I'm going to give you an overview. We'll do it with my colleague, David Anderson. He's going to be making some of the presentations as well. Before I do, I meant to mention not only all my MassDOT colleagues and our consultant team and thank them for their great work, as well as Sarah Peak, who's a former state representative from Cape Cod. She is with the governor's office and serving also as a liaison to this project, making sure that we fully understand all the nuances, details, and deep local understanding to help us do our job. So thank you for being here tonight, Sarah. Tonight, we're going to give you an environmental update. I'm going to tell you why it's so important in a minute. We're going to talk about the property acquisitions process. We know that this has been a very topical, important matter for many of you. We're going to give you an update on some of the subsurface explorations. This is work that you are seeing happening right now on the roadsides in and around this area. We're going to follow up with some items from the last meeting. A couple of you asked us, why are we picking 2 bridge replacements? Why didn't we do a tunnel? Why didn't we do a single bridge? And we answered as well as we could, but we realized it might be a good topic to bring forward to this forum tonight to kind of explain in more detail why we selected the approach that we did. David is going to talk about the entrance and exit lanes. There's been some questions about that. Some people thought they were actually 3rd lanes on the bridge. These are simply for merging safely, so David's going to explain how they work. And then we're going to update you on next steps. And then we'll open it up to your questions and comments. So the environmental update is really important. The environmental process is critically important to getting into construction. For one thing, we cannot gain access to the over $1 billion in federal funds that we have available to Cape Cod Bridges Project until we complete the environmental process. So when you hear us regularly updating you on our progress, That's why, because it is in the critical path to construction. And we also wanted to update you while we're here that we recently received some of that federal funding that we can use for pre-environmental permitting purposes, about $36 million. So that was good news. So when we last met, I told you that we were expecting late July for the filing of the environmental documents. That pushed out a little bit by about 6 weeks. The reason is we are splitting up the document into one federal and one state document. That is due to the executive orders coming out of Washington, D.C. that are very different from the state requirements. So rather than try to bundle it all into one document as we had previously planned to, we had to split them apart to create two separate documents for filing. So the NEPA document, or the Environmental Impact Statement, will go to the federal government, and the MEPA document, the Mass Environmental Policy Act Environmental Impact Report, will go to the state government for review, all around the same time. Both documents include both Sagamore and Bourne bridges, and we are coordinating right now with Federal Highway Administration, making sure that they have advance copies of the chapters, making sure there are no surprises in the process. We expect it to go smoothly and efficiently, and we expect that the process will be completed in 2026. Paired with the documentation will be something called 4F. Could sound a little bureaucratic, I understand, but it's really critically important. 4F is a requirement that we protect park and recreation lands, wildlife, waterfowl. We are particularly focused on the impact of the new bridges on properties owned by the U.S. Corps of Engineers and a campground operated by the Bourne Recreation Authority. So we're working very closely with our colleagues at the Corps of Engineers as well as the Bourne Recreation Authority, and we expect that process will move right along. We've had a lot of discussions. We're nearing the end of that process, but we wanted to let you know that we are moving ahead on multiple fronts on the environmental side. Following the publication of the draft environmental impact statement in early September, we'll hold a public meeting. We will describe the contents of the environmental document. We will explain how you can add your own comments to it, make sure that the reviewers understand the perspective of Cape Cod residents and organizations about the environmental impacts, and we will take any other comments you have on the project. So that's moving along at a very good pace, and we will, by the time we have our next quarterly forum, we expect to be in the environmental process, and we can reinforce or reiterate your opportunities to comment on it. Property acquisitions, you've heard about this before. We have talked about the need to take properties to make way for the bridges, in this case Sagamore Bridge. 13 residential homes will be taken. We have notified all of the homeowners. Again, as we have said, not a step we take lightly. We recognize that it can be very disruptive and distressing to people to have their homes taken. We work very closely with them to appraise the value so that they get every penny they deserve, and we provide a lot of support with trained relocation specialists to help them find a new place to live. That process is ongoing. We have phase one happening right now, where we have made contact with each of the property owners. We did this, we call it early property acquisitions, because we don't want people to feel rushed. We work with them very closely. We have in-person contact when that's appropriate, and that process will continue with the homeowners. Next, the appraisal process is underway. That is a multi-step process where we get into the home, take a look around, make sure we understand the property owner may have made some improvements that we can't see from the outside. They may have made an addition that we can't see from the back. They might have invested in the home in some ways that may not be evident. So that's one of the ways that we have to make sure that everybody gets the full value for our acquisition of their home. So that's going on right now. We have requested permission from the Federal Highway Administration to start round 2 of these acquisitions. This will be a much smaller one, resulting, one of the 13 I mentioned, one is in round 2. We have notified the property owner, and there will be two commercial relocations. Everybody is up to date on that, and the second request includes some smaller and vacant parcels in addition to the ones that I just described. So those are moving along, and again, we recognize of a project of this size, a massive new bridge touching down in a densely settled area, we did make every effort to try to avoid and minimize impacts. Wasn't possible in every case, but we are fully committed to make these happen as smoothly as possible, and we know that for the greater good of the bridge projects, we have to move forward, but we'll do it in a very sensitive way with the property owners. Subsurface explorations, I mentioned this at our last meeting. We said that you could expect to see some visible signs of progress toward Cape Cod bridges. What you are seeing is people in hard hats. You're seeing some machinery out there. We sent out a letter to 1,000 property owners in Bourne just to let them know this is not an acquisition that we're talking about. We do need access to properties in some cases. Sometimes just as a quick stepping into their backyard to take a look around. Sometimes it's to do survey, test pits. It's not happening right away, but we wanted to let people know that they might be getting a request, and if they get that letter, we would follow up if we were certain that we would be stepping onto their property. But it is a legally required document, and it is all work intended to gather data that we use for the design of the bridges. Our current focus is on town-owned land. The town of Bourne has been very cooperative and helpful with us. Also, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has land that we are doing these tests on, as well as our own state highway layout. And as we move forward, we will be asking for temporary access to private properties to collect this data for the purposes of designing Sagamore and Bourne bridges. Some follow-up from the previous meeting. As you heard, if you attended the last meeting, a lot of people asked us, why are you doing it this way? Why 2 new bridges? Why are you putting bridges right next to the old ones? And we did mention, as Senator Fernandes said, that there was a major study done by the bridge's owner, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, to look at this back in 2020. They went through a large number of potential alternatives to building to the alternative that we're pursuing now. We picked out the top 4 that people asked us about, and we'd like to explain why we did not go with those alternatives. So the first one is I should have mentioned, after the Army Corps of Engineers report, we did a study of our own at Mass DOT. So we didn't just take that report and go with it. We also wanted to take a look at it, and our conclusions were similar to those of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So the 4 alternatives that I'd like to just quickly go through right now. Rehabilitating the existing bridges. You heard from Senator Fernandes. Those would involve months-long closures, and they would have pretty devastating impacts on the Cape Cod economy if they had to close the bridges for any length of time. You cannot rehabilitate the bridge without creating those impacts. Single new bridge, filling in or closing Cape Cod Canal and covering with a surface highway, or replacing the bridges with tunnels. So I'm going to just quickly go through those. So you heard rehabilitating the existing bridge would have enormous traffic impacts. As you can see from this picture, and I don't need to tell you this, the bridges are very narrow. There's not a lot of room to put equipment or workers. And if we were to simply rehabilitate the existing bridges, in addition to the full closures and the subsequent impacts, they wouldn't solve the problem. The problems with the bridges are more than structural. They're too narrow. There isn't enough distance between oncoming traffic There's a lack of a median barrier that would protect northbound and southbound traffic from one another. It's very difficult to walk across the bridge, and it's nearly impossible to bike across the bridge. So just rehabbing them would leave all of those problems in place. We also looked at constructing a single new bridge, and that was also suggested at the last meeting. The reason that we are not pursuing that is, again, it would not meet the travel needs either of Cape Cod residents or those coming to visit Cape Cod. It would have major traffic impacts because all of the interchanges and all of the routes coming down are feeding into two separate bridges. So if we put it in the middle, as we show in a rendering here, all of that traffic would converge into single roads leading across the bridge, and it wouldn't work from a traffic perspective, an environmental perspective, and it would also have very significant impacts requiring a lot of acquisition of right-of-way. It would also land the bridge right in the middle of Joint Base Cape Cod, an active military base, so we are not considering that one as a viable alternative. We also were asked, and have been asked more than once, why don't we just fill in the canal and run a road right over it? And the canal, as you can see here from this picture, you see a boat, somebody fishing. It is a major natural resource to people living in the area, not to mention the disruption to navigation. It would force mariners out into the ocean, forcing them into an ocean route that would be particularly dangerous for small watercraft. The environmental impacts, too numerous to count at this point, but we do have endangered and threatened species in the area, not to mention every other species relying on the canal and have been relying on the canal for more than 100 years. So it would be, to say the least, a very difficult environmental process with major negative environmental impacts. Walking along the canal, navigating along the canal, fishing along the canal, boating along the canal, all of those would be severely disrupted by this alternative, and we are not pursuing it further. A tunnel. We have been asked this question many times. Why would we not just replace the bridges with one or two tunnels? The Corps of Engineers said it best, most succinctly, it would cost at least twice as much as the cost of new bridges. Tunnels are extremely expensive. They would also need much more in the way of private property than the current bridges do. The route would have to start much farther back because of the topography of the area around the bridges. It would require major reconfiguration of the approach highways to meet the tunnel entrance and exits. So let me just show you a quick, you can see these, I'm not sure how much they pop out, but the black line, sort of squiggly line, is the topography of the land. Obviously, we would have to get well under that with the red line. And as you can see, the blue lines are where you currently have the interchanges. We would have to pull those right around a mile back in each direction to get the entrance and exit to the tunnel. Huge right-of-way and environmental impacts, not to mention extremely expensive. Another problem with it is that we would not be able to get people on bicycles or on foot across the bridges as we can, with the tunnels as we can with the bridges because of air quality concerns. So for a lot of reasons, we will not be pursuing the tunnel alternative, but we do want you to know why. Here's another example of where the tunnels would go if we were to have them in place. And as you can see, landing in the middle of Joint Base Cape Cod is not a viable option for us, as well as the many other right-of-way impacts that this would entail. So the two bridges, the two replacement bridges are the best alternative according to engineering studies performed by the bridge's owner, Corps of Engineers, and us at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, David, who's going to talk about the entrance and exit lanes.
Thank you, Louisa. So again, this is a follow-up from our last meeting. There was a question around the exit entrance lanes and how they work and why are they being proposed. So this first slide is just a schematic of what this would look like. And in a moment, I'll show you what they look like actually on the plans that we have. But the idea is, if you look at the sketch, kind of towards the top to the right, that'd be a ramp coming in, and then you go across the page, and on the left, that'd be a ramp going off. And what's happening with the Cape is because those interchanges are located immediately on either side of the canal, they're really close together. And not only that, there's that hill, for lack of a better term, in the middle where the bridge is. So what happens is, during the design process, we look at how long and what distance it would take a vehicle to going up that hill to accelerate to the appropriate speed to merge in with the traffic. And then by the same token, on the off-ramp, we consider someone coming down a hill and braking and how long it takes them to stop. And you look at those two distances and you see, do they overlap, or how close together are they? And what we saw in the case of the Cape Cod bridges is that in at least one instance they overlapped, and in other instances the tapers, like you would see on a regular ramp, would be very close together. So it was determined to just continue that. And on this next sketch, you'll see where these actually exist. I know it's kind of hard to see here on this sketch, but we're at the Sagamore crossing. Obviously, that's the canal in the middle. The mainland is to the right, and Cape Cod is to the left. And if you look towards the top of the page where you see those red arrows, that kind of shows the limits of where these entrance-exit lanes would be. So basically, to really break that one down, that ramp, if you were, say, on Scenic Highway and you wanted to go to Cape Cod, you would take that ramp off Scenic Highway, and that the vertical red line there would be where your ramp would come in and the entrance-exit lane would start. And then the off-ramp is located in a fairly similar location, although maybe a little bit closer to the mid-span is where you get off. And that distance is just so short that it's safer to just have it as a continuous lane. So you can also see on the, if you were going from the Cape onto the mainland towards the south side of the page, that's kind of showing the limits of what that entrance-exit lane would be. And then here, moving over to the Bourne crossing, the one on the bottom, so that would be kind of the northbound direction, that's really the longest one. But again, they were so close together as far as when the one would start and the other would begin that it just made sense to make it continuous. So that's the purpose. It's strictly around safety. It's strictly allowing vehicles to achieve the appropriate speed. They call it a merge when one group of vehicles is trying to get into the travel lane while another group is trying to get off right in the same location. So again, it's there for safety, and this is just kind of showing. We had never showed a graphic before that kind of had the limits of where they were located. And then as far as next steps, we just wanted to provide a heads up of something that we're doing, something that would not start until the spring of 2026, but these are foundation load tests. So these are tests that we perform to really get a better understanding of how the foundations are going to work. So we, as Louisa mentioned, have gone out and taken a lot of borings, and we've learned a real lot about the soils. But what this next step does, what we can learn from these load testings, is actually see, putting in the foundations, just like the foundations that would become of the permanent bridge structure, we can really see how the work interfaces with the soils, run tests on these, load these foundations to the point of failure. And a couple of things come out of that. One, we learn more about the design. We can optimize the design, have the most efficient design possible. But the other thing is, we'll share this information with the bidding community, so the bidding community has a much better understanding of what they're getting into when they go to build the bridges. anytime you're doing work underground, if you're bidding a job, that's the thing that bidders are most concerned about, because it is an unknown. And what we're doing is removing some of those unknowns, which is removing risk. And when you remove risk, you reduce costs. Because what contractors do, if they see something that looks real risky, they're forced to up their price to cover certain eventualities. So that's why we're doing it. And what will it look like? It'll look like on either side of the canal, and we're only doing this at the Sagamore Bridge. And we'll be performing this work on property that is either currently owned by the Army Corps of Engineers or owned by Mass DOT. We would start this in the spring, just on property that is already owned by one of those two entities. So I think that's it.
Oh, David, you raised the microphone on me. The reason that we're giving you an early heads up, it might seem like an obscure piece of work that we're doing. We're starting the notification early because this work is going to be noisy, and we want to make sure that we're telling people as early as possible. We'll have more details as we move into the fall and winter. But while it will be noisy, we talked about the greater good earlier, it is very much intended to feed into the design of the bridges and make sure that we're delivering them cost efficiently and with the most robust design that we can. So that's why we're letting you know starting earlier. You're going to start to hear more about it as time moves on. Next steps. So we will continue. We are on a regular cadence of meetings with our federal partners, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, of course, and the Federal Highway Administration, which is the lead agency for this. We are finalizing the environmental documents, making sure that the federal one complies with federal executive orders and the state one complies with state requirements. They will all have the same essential information about the environmental impact of the bridges on Cape Cod's environment. The design itself of each of the bridges is continuing apace. We have a major design submittal at the end of the summer. We're really looking forward to that at Mass DOT. That's another major milestone. So this, by the end of the summer, we will have hit two major milestones, submittal of the design, preliminary design, and the filing of environmental documents. We'll continue to engage with property owners about acquisitions of their land, both homeowners and commercial property owners, continue that process along. We'll continue to be out on the road on town, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and state highway layout, and in the fall, we'll be knocking on doors and asking if we can temporarily access your private property for this testing that we described earlier. As I mentioned, we'll be hosting a public meeting once we file the draft environmental impact statement, but if there are any organizations out there or neighborhood groups and you'd like us to come and talk about the bridges and give you a more detailed update, just ask. We're happy to do it. We're here on a very regular basis. In the very beginning of September, we will be publishing the draft state and federal environmental documents and putting out public notice about the meeting. So that's what's going on with the project. For more information, you can use this QR code. We have, you can email me. We also have a project email address, and you can leave a comment online. We will be sending out this presentation to Senator Fernandes, whom we again thank very much for hosting this forum and giving us an opportunity to communicate with Cape Codders about the Cape Cod Bridges project. Thank you very much. I think Jack is, thank you.
Yeah, so if you signed in and you wrote you wanted to ask a question, I have you in a queue, and then once we go through that, we can go to other questions. We're going to keep it to a strict 2 minutes in the interest of hearing as many people as we can, and I will have an obnoxious timer just to make sure we stick by that. So first up, Paul Niedzwiecki.
Thanks, Jack. I'm Paul Nizwicki. I'm the CEO of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for having this presentation. Thank you to Senator Fernandes for sponsoring these forums. I've been at the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce for 4 years. Prior to that, I was at the Cape Cod Commission for 10 years. So I've been dealing with Mass Highway, Mass DOT for over 20 years now, and I just want to go on the record saying this is the best project I've ever seen them manage. You know, my predecessor, Wendy Northcross, really talked about bridges and brought it to the forefront when it wasn't clear if something happened to one of the bridges, whether it was going to be the federal government that's going to replace it or the state. We've come a long way in this very complicated project, but it is essential that we keep the momentum going and keep moving forward with this project. Cape Cod is still a travel and tourism economy, even though the upper and mid-Cape areas have transitioned to more of a year-round economy. But in 2023, we did $2.7 billion in visitor spend. And that produced almost $250 million in tax revenue. Local meals and tax, about $80 million, split between the 15 towns, and over $160 million back to the state, which is more than we get back in unrestricted local aid. So we are a donor region to the state. That economy, if anything happens to the bridges, especially if there's any sort of partial closure, a third of that economy goes away almost overnight. The impacts would be devastating to everyone, in particular year-round residents. You know, this is a traffic issue. These bridges were originally constructed almost 100 years ago to accommodate 1 million trips between both bridges. They currently see 38 million trips a year. That's the equivalent of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And we only have to look to what happened over 4th of July weekend to know that we need to do something about the traffic. And it's not just about getting, the bridges themselves can't accommodate the traffic that the approaches can. So they've got to be replaced. And those evacuation route signs that you see when you're leaving are only decorations right now until we get the bridge fixed. So thank you for the work that you've done. Infrastructure always comes with some human cost. We're very sympathetic and compassionate about that. But thank you for all your efforts, and let's keep the project moving.
Thank you, Paul. You mentioned managing the project, and I realized I neglected to introduce Ann Kennedy. She is the new project manager. She'll be overseeing the day-to-day activities. Some of you remember Brian Cordero, who is her predecessor, and Ann just started last week. We're very glad to have her on board. Thank you, Paul.
All right. Michael Kasparian.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm Michael Kasparian. I'm the Executive Director of the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce. I was really interested in coming here tonight, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what Paul just talked about from the perspective, though, from Falmouth, and I know this is a really emotional project. It takes a lot of emotions. It's change. Change is difficult, but there is a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear and trepidation in Falmouth about what would happen if worst-case scenario, as the Senator talked about, those bridges had to be shut down. And as we know, up to 50% of our workers are now coming from the other side of the bridge. The bigger problem in Falmouth, and Falmouth is a little bit different because Falmouth has transitioned into more of a year-round community and also a retirement community. So many of our teachers, our police officers, our DPW workers and all live on the other side of the bridge because that has really made housing so unaffordable. So there's a lot of fear amongst our small businesses. We have about 1,000 small businesses in Falmouth, most who employ up to 3 to 10 people, and they can't hire people as it is right now. So it is imperative that the projects get done. We're very concerned about the funding, want to know what we can do to help with that, but I think really the primary focus that I wanted to come here was to express to you through the 600 member businesses of the Falmouth Chamber of how much anxiety there really is over this project stalling for some reason, and then us going down to a situation where, as Paul Nizwicki had indicated, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to leave, and that's not even talking about the people on Martha's Vineyard. You know, everything can be redirected to the Vineyard through New Bedford, but not to Falmouth and Mashpee in our area. So thank you for the work that you're doing. We're very supportive as well. as Paul indicated, empathetic. We understand that there's going to be a lot of emotions going on, but our business owners are also very, very nervous about that. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Ann Scott Putney.
Thank you very much to Senator Fernandes and to you for this very thorough and detailed presentation. I'm the president and CEO of Heritage Museums and Gardens here in Sandwich. I'm also the vice chair of the board of directors of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, and I'm a member of the Cape and Islands Bridge Coalition. So I'm here just truly to express our strong support for this project, and especially for the imperative to find funding to replace both bridges. Having functional bridges in good condition is not only essential to our regional economy, but critical to supporting our regional businesses and nonprofits, the 230 residents who live here year-round, and also the 5 million visitors and tourists who love Cape Cod and visit every year. I lead a nonprofit that's the largest cultural attraction on Cape Cod. We have over 140,000 visitors annually. But we're just one of over 10,000 businesses here on Cape Cod, and like them, we depend on the bridges every day. For example, of the 50,000 commuters who use the bridges every day to get to work, about 20 to 25% of my workforce is among them. We also rely on the trucks that cross the bridges every day, as all of us do in this room. There are about 6,300 truck trips every year, everything from stocking our grocery stores to vital services for health and ambulance care and everything else. We're here for the benefit of the public at Heritage, but we're also a vital part of our community's economy. There's a lot of halo effect of what we do to restaurants, inns, the beaches, shops, everything else. I understand, in fact, that tourism generates about $2.7 billion in revenue for Cape Cod. And as others have mentioned, if there had to be some sort of catastrophic closure of one of the bridges or simply for rehabilitation, the loss to our regional economy would be $1.7 billion, 1.4. Oh, my time's almost up. I simply want to say that that would choke our economy, and we simply can't afford to take that risk. So in closing, finding the funding to replace both bridges is not just nice to have, it's critical for our collective economy and for the quality of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just answer 2 points that I've been hearing in these. One is about the funding. We do have Sagamore fully funded, as we have mentioned previously. We are applying for funding grant for Bourne Bridge this summer. We've heard loud and clear about the importance of the bridge to Cape Cod. And I just wanted you to know that's shared all the way up to the governor's office. We report monthly on the status of the project, and it's been made clear to us to keep moving, keep it moving and advancing it. So thank you.
Matt Pita.
To the state, thank you again for being here with us tonight, and to Senator Fernandes. My name is Matt Pitt. I'm the Director of Communication with the Davenport Companies. We're based in South Yarmouth, a family-based company that goes back to 1956. We're still family-owned by the CEO, DeWitt Davenport. We're one of the largest private employers on Cape Cod in multiple industries: senior living, construction, residential, et cetera. We want to, and we're also a founding member of the Cape and Islands Bridges Coalition with the Chamber, the Cape Cod 5, Cape Cod Healthcare, and others. And we want to convey a couple of things. One, Senator Fernandes said it earlier, and then he was also quoted in the Enterprise this week that it was the most significant transportation project. And tonight, as he indicated, it's the most significant project we've faced here on the Cape and Islands probably since the bridges were first built, and he's correct. On the Cape, we face a lot of challenges: housing, wastewater, equity, et cetera. If we do not build these 2 new bridges, none of those other issues matter. The bridges are literally the most important issue we're facing right now on the Cape and the Islands. I think a very important fact to convey, and I stepped back in my previous role before I was with the company I'm with now, the Davenport Companies. I was a news reporter and editor for 25 years here on Cape Cod in Boston. I covered this story extensively, day in and day out. An important message to convey, and unfortunately it just does not get conveyed in the media enough now, is that these two bridges need to be constructed not to increase capacity for either tourism or new housing on Cape Cod. These two bridges need to be built to sustain what we have for our current economic situation on the Cape. We are in no way trying to increase capacity on the Cape. What we're trying to do is make sure that you can actually go to your supermarket and get groceries, and that you can go to the store and buy supplies. If those two bridges go down in any way, we are facing an economic Armageddon here on Cape Cod. So we fully support this and really want to drive home the message. This is not about increased capacity for Cape Cod in any way.
Thank you. And we agree.
Daryl Crossman. He had to leave. Sorry, Daryl. Greg Balzikian. My apologies if I butchered that. Greg, you good? Okay, all right. John York.
Thank you. I'm John York. I'm a resident of Bourne. There's a lot of questions. So we hear the need from the whole Cape. And echoing some of those needs, we need to be able to go to the grocery store. We need to be able to pick up our kids at the school from their sports events. We need to go to town hall. It's across the canal. We need to go to Sandwich to a meeting, public meeting about the bridges. We don't have to cross the canal if you live on this side, but you have to travel through both interchanges to get here. So it's critical to us how we get around our town every day, not just when we're going off Cape. How we get around our town 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. And I think that there has been a lot of attention paid to getting traffic from far away from Cape Cod on one side to well down the Cape on the other side in this project. But I don't believe the same attention has been paid to how people in the town of Bourne get from one destination to another. And I know that's a mandate. That's a mandate for any federally funded project, that all the roadway users need to have their needs met. And I really think it's a serious black mark on this project that you have not spent the time and attention on analyzing trips that begin and end on the same side of the canal in Bourne, or that travel across the canal to both destinations in Bourne. And very biggest black mark on this project is you have paid very little attention to pedestrians and bicycles, except for those going across the bridges. And you even wrote them out of the purpose and need of the project with no public request for that. You changed the purpose and need statement to only refer to cross-canal trips. You can read it for yourself. It's your statement. So I think this project needs to do better. You've been telling us all along, just wait, we'll get there when we do better. We're there now. You need to allocate a significant amount of meeting time to that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. York.
Okay. Bert Tallerman.
You won't need a timer for me. Bert Tallerman, president of Cape Cod 5. Nice to see you. Senator, thank you for your passion about the project and recognizing the importance of this project. I'm not going to repeat everything I heard from others. At the bank, we're a founding member of the Cape and Islands Bridge Coalition, and I will merely kind of confirm that from kind of our unique vantage point in terms of viewing the local economy, a closure of either one of these bridges is just a complete economic disaster for this region in ways and shapes that people can't even begin to imagine, that extends significantly beyond even the studies that have been done. And again, I am not someone who generally is very dramatic. This is something that keeps us up at night. It should keep everybody in this region up at night. Just think about it. There is essentially nothing that we produce here. All our food, all our medicine, over half of our workforce, it all comes here across those bridges. So, you know, this is all about preserving the wonderful way of life we have here. Thank you for your efforts. We will do anything we can to continue to support you in this effort. And again, we thank you.
Thank you.
So this is the last one of folks who signed up, and then after that, if you just want to raise your hand and I'll point if you did not get the chance to sign in. So Rick Orton.
Good evening. I'm Rick Orton. I'm Director of Administration for Cape Cod Express, a trucking company that services Cape Cod and the islands, probably more than anybody else. I believe we have about 120 bridge crossings every day with just our company. And, you know, the economic impact has been talked about, but I think the one thing that we need to really think about is if my 17 trips to Nantucket every day don't go over with all their supplies, there is no Nantucket. Thank you.
So yeah, if you didn't sign up now. I did. Oh, you did? I missed your name. I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, my name's Steve Lucas.
Sorry, Steve.
No big deal. Do I look upset? Hi, my name's Steve Lucas. I live here in Bourne. And I wonder what's going to happen to traffic. I wonder what's going to happen to Bourne. Nobody seems to care about Bourne anymore. Look what happened to that traffic circle. It's just a mud field now. Nobody seems to care. And I'm wondering, when we build these two bridges, what's going to be left of Bourne? You know, this is my hometown, and I care deeply about it. And somebody's got to care. The other thing I'm worried about is if we increase traffic on the Cape, what's going to be left of the Cape? Are we going to have to get more roads? Are we going to have to expand the ones we have to accommodate the increased crowds? I'm all for bridges, don't get me wrong, but I think we got to be considerate of what and who we are. Thank you.
My name is Mark Kendall, and my house is one that has been designated for taking. It's a brand new home. I have two simple questions based on Senator Fernandez's comments yesterday morning on WCVB's On the Record. He said the bridge project is, quote, fully funded by the federal government, legally funded, but that money is not yet in Massachusetts coffers. He also admitted funding for similar projects has been pulled recently. For example, the Trump administration has rescinded a $327 million grant awarded in 2023 for the Alston multimodal project. This is very different than what MassDOT has been telling the public, including a few minutes ago where you said this was fully funded and that we had the money to do it, and what we have been told directly by several MassDOT employees. So my first question of two simple ones, can you please clarify the funding status and whether it is at risk at all? Second, the senator said that if funding falls through, it would mean major rehabilitation for the bridges, as you outlined in your presentation. It sounds like, from his interview yesterday morning, that this is Plan B. If it isn't Plan B, what is Plan B if the federal funding falls through? Thank you.
Thank you for watching OTR. So I was just asked a question yesterday on a TV show about status of federal funding. because the Trump administration has been cutting lots of federal funding to the state of Massachusetts, every state in the nation, Massachusetts included, and that's not only, you know, hundreds of millions to education and tourism and all these other things that are having really nasty impacts on our economy, but also has cut funding to transportation. And so, you know, I think it is it's a concern of mine that this administration has been cutting funding for really critical programs here in Massachusetts, and in some cases has been doing that illegally. In Massachusetts, we have the funds legally allocated for this project. So any taking of those funds or attempt, which we haven't had any word of, would be a completely illegal thing for the administration to do. And so our Attorney General would act very quickly to sue the federal government if they were to, you know, illegally take funds that Congress has appropriated and the administration, the federal government has already allocated. So I hope, does that help? I think, so that's where we're at right now. The federal government hasn't alluded to any of this. And then, as Louisa mentioned, the project did hit a milestone which released federal funding for the project, which I think is actually a good sign for this project in terms of federal government support. There's the piece around, I did mention the piece on the Bourne Bridge, which is to say we don't have funding yet for the Bourne Bridge. It is incredibly important from a funding perspective that we as a region, that our federal delegation is fighting hard to get the funding for the Bourne project. I know this is something that the Congressman's office, our senators are deeply committed to, and the Healy administration is really committed to this as well. And so that's the next part in this, is applying for funding for the Bourne Bridge. So as folks might have remembered, there was the funding for the Sagamore project was a one-time application. Instead of going for both bridges at once, it was deemed that's actually not possible. There's no federal grants that are actually that large from a transportation perspective to apply for both bridges at the same time. So the Healy administration, I think, made a smart decision, which is to go for just the Sagamore first, because according to the Army Corps report, that's the bridge that has to go through a major rehabilitation first before the Bourne Bridge does. It's also the more trafficked bridge. It's not the one I use, but it's it's the more trafficked one, and the one that makes the most sense. So that was good wisdom. She also doubled the amount of state support for that, doubled what the previous administration did. What the previous administration, I'm talking governor's administration, did wasn't even competitive enough to apply, to actually get the grant. And so that actually set us back a few years, what the previous governor's administration did. Healy administration doubled it, and that made us competitive. That got us the grant. So that's really important. And so then the next piece of this is, okay, we have the funding for the federal government legally allocated, and now we as a region, our federal delegation, the state, we're all pivoting and saying, okay, let's get the Bourne fully funded. I hope I tried to answer that. Extreme case scenario. Look, here's the deal. Like, we cannot have this region shut down. That is a non-starter. That's a non-starter for me. I think that's a non-starter for everyone in this room. A major rehabilitation shuts down our region. That can't happen. So, in my view, if for some reason that does it, that the federal government neglects their job, does not pay for the bridges that they own, that they're legally obligated to maintain, then we need to have a really serious conversation about the state stepping in and making sure we're not shutting down our entire Cape and Islands region that is 300,000 people, millions of visitors a year. It would devastate our entire region and make life here really hard, if not impossible, for a lot of people. So this is an extreme case here. We're not there yet. I appreciate the question, but that's my personal view on it, and that's where I would stand on that. So thank you. So yeah.
If I could, Senator, if I might just respond to the part about the Alston Multimodal Project. Those funds were rescinded with the exception of $8 million. That is a very different program from the Bridge Investment Program and the MEGA program. Congress rescinded all funds from the Neighborhood Access and Equity grant program nationwide. That was not a surprise to us. They objected to the equity aspects of that program. We have heard no such indication on any of the major bridge infrastructure programs nationwide. And in fact, as mentioned earlier, we just received a $36 million supplement from the existing grant to pursue the work that we're doing.
Sorry. Sorry, I'm like pointing.
My name is Joan Hendel, and I have a few questions. First of all, we keep hearing how much your team understands what we're all going through, and that is a bold-faced lie, and here's why. When your relocation team came to my home and gave us their sympathies and told us how much they understand, I specifically asked them, have you ever had an eminent domain letter submitted to you? And they said no. So I would ask you, please, Mrs. Piwanski, tell your team to stop telling all of us that they understand, because unless they've sat in our shoes, they don't, number one. First of all, and then all of your listings of the wildlife and the refugees and the waterfowl, could you please tell me where in that whole list you have allotted allocation for mental health support? Because each one of us that live in Round Hill, when your team comes out in their cars and they stand on our driveways with 7 people doing appraisals, it puts us over the edge. And unless you've been there, you don't understand. Second one, we ask for a timeline. There is no timeline. We want to know exactly what steps. You gave us a part of one tonight, so thank you for that. You also told me over the phone at the very beginning of this, when we got our letter on my birthday, that we're not rushing you out, but it sure feels that way to all of us. When your team comes and calls and wants to do this and rude to us, yes, and lied to us. Your team asked one of my neighbors if we knew. We came from the Midwest. We're both New Englanders. We came from the Midwest. And your team asked a neighbor of ours, do you really think the Hendels didn't know anything about the bridge being taken in eminent domain? Do you really think? And I confronted them when they came to their house, but they didn't know that I knew that they were them. But that's wrong. You don't go into, anyway, please correct that. Third, noise. We have neighbors that are not getting their houses taken, that are 50 feet from where those cranes are going to be, and the noise will be atrocious. I would like to know, what are you going to do for our neighbors that remain? Because they're equally important. And please reconsider the mental health piece, because you have overlooked that. You care about birds and trees and all that stuff. But here we sit, 4 of us right there, and more in the audience, I'm sure, and not one offer of mental health support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hendel.
My name is Jane Logan. I live on Main Street in Sandwich. My first question is this project fully funded, taking tariffs into account? That's a huge issue right now in construction. My second question is there any money available from the Department of Defense? We have Joint Base Cape Cod and Pave Pause, or Space Force now. Are there any funds available for that, for the Bourne Bridge, or to help offset whatever Trump might do to this project? And then my last point is not to be snippy, but I live on Main Street in Sandwich. On the weekend, half the time I can't even leave my house. There are days when I would love the state to take my house, that I would love to move away. But I'm a 14th generation Cape Codder. My grandmother watched the original bridge being built. But I'm hoping this project does something for the traffic, especially keeping bridge traffic from going into the local towns on the weekends, because it's just gridlock. It's a safety hazard. It's awful. But I'm a little concerned about what Trump's going to do to the project and the cost of tariffs to the whole overall project.
Thank you. I can briefly address and what you just described about not wanting to leave and move about because of the traffic. I think that's exactly what Mr. Pitta was describing, the quality of life impacts and the need to improve traffic, and we hear that loud and clear. We have been in coordination with Space Force on some of the design issues. We haven't discussed funding with them. We have over $1 billion in federal grant funds and over $1 billion committed by the Commonwealth. We are considering, it's an excellent point you raised, steel tariffs have recently been doubled, so we're obviously tracking that, and we do periodic cost assessments. We did a major one with the Federal Highway Administration a couple of years back, and we have another one due. So we do track costs and make sure that we're keeping the project scope within available funds. So thank you for addressing that.
My name is Fred Anderson. I'm a Sandwich resident. One of my concerns is, during construction, what will be the impact on the existing roads that feed the two bridges? Obviously, the two bridges that we have don't support the traffic, particularly in the summertime. And during construction of the new bridges, it sort of begs the question, are we putting more of a burden on the existing approaches? Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, two things. One is we'll have a very intensive traffic management plan that comes along with just about any construction project that we do, including mobile operations like, cleaning out catch basins. We take into account the impact on traffic. That said, it will be noticeable when we're out there starting construction. We're going to do our best to manage traffic to keep away from the peak periods. We have special rules for Cape Cod construction, and I will say that one, I think, good moment for us is when the first half of Sagamore is built and we can move traffic over onto it so that we can take down the existing bridge and then start construction on the second one. So there will be traffic impacts, there's no escaping that, but we're very focused on traffic management during construction.
Hello, Louisa.
Hi.
Can you hear me? I want to say thank you for all that you've done since you've come on to be involved as a spokesperson for the governor's office and for MassDOT. I have been involved as a board selectman in this project for many years, going back to even before Brian Cadell, so I've been there at the forefront. I know I keep on advocating to make sure that transparency is a must, and I will say under your leadership that has happened.
Thank you.
In fact, I've been advocating for Upper Cape Tech for many years, and on a positive note, at the many years of my mouth saying more and more, about 9 o'clock tonight, they'll be starting a temporary traffic light at Upper Cape Tech. So, I want to say thank you for that, because I know advocating for this as well, and thank you for the leadership in the room that listened to us. I don't think it was because of the traffic accident with our police officer. This was in the plans long before that. It just happened. Unfortunate that accident happened, and all of a sudden, things got pushed to the forefront. But again, you're helping to mitigate a problem that's been going on for many years. So I want to say thank you for that. And for the resident that said, that asked the question, has anybody been involved with eminent domain takings? I know firsthand. My grandparents' house on Academy Drive was over where the Mass Maritime Dome is. It was taken in 1968. We were lucky we got the last waterfront lot on Academy Drive in 1969 when we were the last house moved. We were lucky, but as the Academy expands, the threat is still there. We may lose our house again, but the leadership at the Academy says we don't need to take any more takings. We can just buy what we need as they go up for sale if the price is right. So, I mean, I love what the Academy does, I love what they stand for, but I myself, through my family's history in my neighborhood, I understand what the threat of eminent domain is all about, because we've lived in one place in one way or another. But I just wanted to say thank you for your leadership and to your staff. I've been with your staff more often, not at different meetings, and with Sarah Peak behind us in the leadership as well. I've been there, you know, and anytime I ask a question, I do get a follow-up. So just keep on doing what you're doing. Some people may not like what they have to say, and I may be one of them, but I do respect you for what, every time I have something, you do get back to me, and that means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you on behalf of our team. Thank you.
DA?
First of all, I want to say thank you very much for taking time this evening and giving the presentation. I also want to say thank you to Senator Fernandes for putting this all together, and for all of you for showing up here today. For the record, my name is Rob Galaboyce. I am the District Attorney for Cape Cod and the Islands. I do want to especially say thank you for your efforts of prioritizing traffic mitigation, but I want to just offer it through the lens of the criminal justice system. As you know, as DA, I'm in charge of public safety for, here in the Cape, just about 265,000 people between Barnstable, Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard on an annual basis. But as we all know, that swells to well over 1 million during the summer months. We maintain 5 offices across that district in Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Edgartown, Falmouth, Barnstable, and Orleans. We have about 65 employees. About 20% of which cross those bridges every single day. But more importantly, we also handle between 7,000 and 7,500 cases every year. And I can say with confidence, thousands of those cases involve witnesses that have to cross those bridges every single year, be it professional witnesses like folks from the crime lab, DNA labs, interpretive services, and of course, we have a lot of victims and witnesses themselves that live over the bridge. So we really do appreciate you focusing on traffic mitigation throughout the entire process of the several years to come, so we can keep moving forward seeking justice in all of our cases. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
My apologies as well that I'm pointing at everyone. I know it's kind of rude, but, you know, if anyone has a better suggestion.
My name is Mary Gallerani. I've lived in the Round Hill section for 67 years. We were the 3rd house built in that neighborhood. I would like to know if you've got a better timeline for us as far as the taking is concerned, because we're hearing mixed messages. The appraisal team recently visited me, and they indicated it would be 4 to 5 months before they get back to us. But on the other hand, it could be 6 months. Could it be a year? I'm afraid I think our biggest concern is that you're going to take our property and a glitch appears or occurs, and the property will be out in the cold wherever we happen to be, and the property sits there as it has happened before in Massachusetts, from what I understand. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask John Dallaire, our Director of Right-of-Way, to respond to your question on the length of time for the appraisal process.
Good evening, everybody. My name's John Dallaire. As was stated, I'm the Director of the Right-of-Way Bureau for MassDOT Highway Division. So part of the reason why the question about timing is so complicated, and part of the reason why we're calling this an advanced acquisition, is there are so many properties that are being taken, as you know. What we have to assure is that once a property is taken and we need to relocate an individual or a family, we need to have a property available for them. And as you know, there's limited amounts of property available in the Cape area, and we want to keep people that are displaced in an area where they want to be. You know, some people have families, they have children in school and otherwise. So it's hard to pinpoint a timeline exactly as to when you will be able to move. And part of that's going to depend on the individual. Some people that have been interviewed so far have indicated they'd like to stay in their home as long as possible. Others have indicated that they'd like to leave as soon as possible. So what we plan to do is once and when you talked about the appraisal process, I think that the answer that the appraisers gave is dedicated to the appraisal process itself. And I should talk about that just for a second so you understand. I know that somebody mentioned that there's 7 people that show up at a home for the appraisal. And the reason why that is because state and federal laws mandate that a certain protocol has to be followed for these acquisitions. And there's an appraisal. There's actually 2 appraisals done on a piece of property. Then there's a review appraisal. And if that appraisal amount of just compensation is greater than $300,000, it has to go before a board that's appointed by the governor's office. It's called the Real Estate Appraisal Review Board. So there's a very specific process that has to take place. And it takes actually months for that process to take place, for the first appraisal, the second appraisal, the review, and then to set up the review board to hear those cases. So that 3 or 4 months that you probably mentioned is probably the appraisal process. And then once that's complete, there's going to be an offer made to the individual that owns the home. Once that offer is made, there's 30 days to consider that, so that's another month. So we're already talking about 3 or 4 or 5 months before we even get to a point where there's a number that's being discussed. So if you take those number of months plus the months we've already spent, and then we start to, when we value the property and we understand what the replacement value is, then we have to find a house that's that's comparable to the house that's being taken. And in this particular area, to try to find a dozen or so houses is going to be a time issue that we're not really sure of yet. If we were just taking one house, it would be easy. But in order to have a house that's available for you, that could take a serious amount of time also. But what will never happen, and you mentioned, is no one is ever going to be put out into the cold. You will never be in a position where the house is taken and someone will say, listen, on this date, you have to leave the house. There'll always be a chance to move that number around. And I know everybody's looking for a finite number, but it's really hard to do that. We wouldn't want to put a finite number on it, because if we did, that would mean if we said in 6 months you have to leave, that would mean whether we found a house or not, we'd be displacing you, and that's not something we would do. What we have to do is try to work all this towards the advertising date, and that's why we started so early. We want to give all of the people all the time that they need, or as much time as they need, to find a new place and for us to help them move into that place, and to try to do it as comfortable as possible, and to try to be as sensitive as we can to their needs. So, you're raising your hand. Go ahead.
The relocation team indicated that they have to go out and find one comparable property. I don't think they're going to be able to find a comparable property to my house. My house is a little bit different, well built. I think it would be far better if we accept an appraisal, we come to terms with the state on the appraisal value, and that it's put into our bank accounts and we can do with it whatever we want, rather than having the state dictate to us that we have to follow their rules by having this one house. We can accept it or reject it. I've been a real estate broker for 50 years. My late husband and I had our own office for 40 years. So I know the real estate business, and I would much sooner have the money in my hands, just as you would like to have the money from the federal government in your hands, so that I can do with it what I choose. I'm going to be 90. I've lived in my house for 67 years. Can you imagine the anguish that I'm feeling? Because it's heartbreaking.
No, I know, and I will never say that I understand what that anguish is like. I couldn't possibly. But one thing I want to clarify, we're talking about 2 different things. Once your home is valued and there's an acquisition price on it, that is your money. You can do whatever you want with it. You don't have to buy another house if you don't want to. You can move to Florida and rent if you want. There's another component to that. There's the acquisition, and then there's the relocation. The relocation part is where we identify a home that's like your home. You don't have to buy that home. You don't have to move to that home. That's just a number that gets articulated. You could, like I said, you could move to Florida if you want. You can take the money and do whatever you want with it. So there's two components to it. We don't tell you where to go. We just identify what's comparable so that it sets a baseline for what you can do. We would never tell anybody where they have to go. But what the federal law says is there has to be a replacement home available at the time. That's the part. It has to be available at the time, and that has to be for everybody. So we can't just pick one home and use it for 13 people. There has to be a home available for every individual person when it's time for them to move. That's why it's hard to set a timeline, because there probably are not 13 homes available today. And it might take time for those to be available, and the federal government says you cannot move those people until it is available.
Have you ever had to find a replacement for a brand new home that's 6 months old? Yes or no?
Not since I've been in this position. I've been there for 11 years.
Thank you. It's 7 o'clock. I think we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Sure. Thanks. Yep.
Totally different approach. What do you anticipate the timeline being for hiring a contractor and beginning construction on the Sagamore Bridge? I'm in a butter in a commercial property, so.
Right now, we are tracking toward completing the environmental process next year, then starting the procurement process. The procurement process is going to take up to a year because it's a very complex project. We're going to be focusing on a design-build approach. So we're tracking toward late 2027, early 2028 for issuing what we call a notice to proceed. That's when we tell the contractor, you can now get going. You may not see work started right away as they're procuring materials or gearing up, but that's when we anticipate issuing the so-called NTP.
So what I'm hearing is a contractor would be hired sometime in 2027?
Late 2020, well, yes, we'll complete the process and then issue the notice to proceed to the contractor in late 27, early 28.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank everyone for coming out tonight. Again, I want to thank Sandwich High School for hosting. Thank you, Louisa, the MassDOT team, for your presentation. And thank you to everyone from this community for coming out and making your voices heard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Senator.
Oh, yeah.
My name's Steve.
Thank you for doing
Yeah, well, I'll see you
How
next
are you?
time.
Thank you so much. How are you? My name's Steve Lucas.
Did I interrupt you?